In this example, I'm going to use the marquee tool to cut up this image into 4 pieces and add a little bit of stroke on the edges and also a drop shadow on a couple of them. And I'm also going to extend the background and add a background color just so we can have a little bit more room to move and transform these pieces, moving them around and rotating them a little bit as well. So I'm going to start off with this image, and I'm just going to click into my ruler here and drag down from this top ruler. So clicking, holding, and dragging down. It doesn't have to divide it up into equal pieces. I'm just moving it to kind of create 4 pieces. If you don't see your ruler, go ahead and view and turn on rulers. And just clicking and dragging from the rulers will bring out the guides. Once I have the guide set up, I can click on my marquee tool here and just make sure that Snap to is on. So Snap to guides. Once I have that on, I can just click and drag, and my marquee tool will snap to these guidelines now, making things a lot easier for my selection, making it exact. So once I have that on my first piece, I'm just going to copy that piece and paste it into its own layer. So I'm just going to go Command C or Control C, which will copy it, and Control V or Command V. And you can see in my layer panel here that I've got now that piece cut out exactly in that same spot that it started. I'm just going to repeat that process a few times. So I'm just going to click on my background layer, make sure my marquee tool is selected, and I'm just going to click and drag, and sometimes it helps to kind of be outside of the image so you can get around it. And again, it's going to snap to the guide, so it'll make things a lot easier. Make sure that they're exact. I'm just going to do it at Command C and Command V again. And now I have got those 2 layers set up. You can see that I've got those 2 cutouts now. And just again repeating that process 2 more times. Command C, Command V, selecting the background layer again, and clicking, dragging to make that rectangle, and Control C and Control V again. So now if I hide that background layer and start hiding my other layers, you can see that I've got the 4 pieces for this puzzle. And now I want to make this background a little bit bigger and fill it with its own color. So to do that, I'm just going to go to Image and Canvas Size. So this will not modify the image that's in there, it'll just make the canvas bigger that it's on. So I'm just going to add a little bit to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a couple of inches on both sides. So I'm just going to increase that to 20, and then the height I'll just increase that to 29. And the anchor is just going to decide where the additions or subtractions for this is going to take place. So right now it's in the center, so it's just going to add space on the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. But if I switch that, I can add space just from this particular point, and it'll add the space from there. So let me just go back to that middle point and hit OK. So I just wanted a little bit more space to kind of work with here. This will also help me when I go to do my stroke on my images or my layers. So I'm just going to select that first layer, and under Effects down at the bottom here, you'll see Stroke. I'm just going to click on that, and it's going to open up its own little window. And if I zoom in enough, you can see that I'm just not letting me zoom because I'm in this panel here, but if I just zoom in on it now, and now go back into that Effects panel and Stroke, you can see it's already adding this black line around it. And for the stroke, it can be positioned on the outside of the layer, inside, or right down the center. So depending on how thick it is, you can really tell the difference. So that's in the center, that's the outside, and that's in the center. Oops. Let me just go inside again. And I'll just leave it outside. And I'm just going to use a very small stroke. And I'm going to click on this color and just go make sure that it's darker than what it was before. Just going to hit OK. And you can increase the size or decrease that size, but I don't need it that big. I'm just going to leave it at, say, 10 or 13, somewhere around there. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And for this piece, I might as well add the backdrop to it, the little shadow. So if I go to Effects again, you'll see another option called Drop Shadow. And right away you can see that shadow sort of appear right here. So depending on what layer I want to be on top, I can add this to all of them. I can add it to one of them just to see what the look will, how that looks. So let me just, again, decrease or make that shadow a little darker so you can see it better. And you've got the opacity. You can kind of dial that down to make it a little bit more transparent if you want to. And you can mess around with the angle to show the direction. And I'll just leave it down there. And you can also play with the distance, how far away it is, if you really want to make that piece kind of pop, maybe a little bit higher. And your spread, and then the size. So I'm just going to play with that just until I find something I kind of like. So I'm going to say with that's pretty good. The other thing you can also add is some noise to it. You can sort of see what that does right there. Just has a little bit of noise to it. You don't have to go too high to see it. I'm just going to leave it pretty low. Just going to go ahead and hit OK. And now with that piece as a stroke and also has a shadow on it, I'm just going to click on my Move tool here and just move it around. And the background layer is still on, so I'm just going to scroll down to my layers here and just turn that off. I want to create another layer now that's got like the image on it or the layer on it, just a color, the background color. So to do that, I'm just going to go, and there's many ways to do this. I'm just going to go up to the top layer, top menu, and go to Layer, New, Layer. And you see this blank layer has been created, this transparent layer has been created, and I'm just going to go to Edit, Fill, and Foreground Color. And that's going to be this color right here. If I want to change that, I have to go in and change that afterwards. If I want to, I can make my own selection of a color. And I can just pick any color I want there. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. And that layer is now on top. If I want it to be on the bottom of the stack so everything else will be visible, I can just click and drag it down. And you'll see as I drag it down, the other layers start to appear. So now I've got that blue layer as my background, and I can move these layers around a little bit. To add that stroke and that drop shadow to my other pieces here, I can start off by clicking on those layers and adding those effects. And you can see that stroke will be on that layer now. I can also change the color if I want to, make that a little bit different. I'll just bring it back to black. I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. And then if I really wanted a shadow on that one, I can add that as well. I'm just going to leave that one alone. And I'm also going to add this stroke and shadow in a different way. So I can click on my Alt button or my Option key and just click on my effects and drag it down to the layer I want to add it to. And that will add the stroke and the drop shadow onto the next layer, or the layer that I move it to. So I'm just going to do that again, and I'll just add it to layer 4 here. And now you can see that I've added it to this layer as well. And I just took the stroke, so let me just click on this drop shadow and drag it over to 4. Now you can see I've added the drop shadow to that layer as well. So this one doesn't have the drop shadow, and the other 3 do. Let me just open this up so we can see this a little bit better. So just a couple of ways you can do it. You can always go back into the effects panel and add your effects, or you can click on one that's already done so you can be sure it's got the same settings. Holding down the Option key, clicking and dragging onto that layer. And that will add all of the effects on there. And you can also select one of them at a time by just clicking on that individual effect. So now I can just move these around. Created a little bit of space with that, increasing the canvas. Maybe reorder them, and whatever layer's on top is going to be the layer that you see above it. And I'm just going to move that, inadvertently move the background layer. So I'm just going to move these layers now. And just turn off the guides. I can go under View, Show, turn off guides. And I'm just going to move these images a little bit more. So instead of transforming just by moving them, I'm just going to try to rotate them. To do that, I can go under Edit and Free Transform. And you'll see a box appear around that layer. And if I hover over the edges or the sides, you'll see the cursor change a little bit. So I can change the dimensions just by clicking and dragging. If I hold down the Shift key when I do that, it'll change disproportionately. If I hover over the corners a little bit further away from them, you'll see this 2 arrows will appear, and I can rotate my layer. So that Free Transform tool will give me options for how I can transform this, not just moving it. I could do a few other things in here. And to make sure that that actually applies, I just need to hit this check here or hit the return key. So I'm just committing to the transform. And now I can move it back again if I want to. So that's it for this one. Next, play around with using the brush tool to create our cutouts instead of using the basic shapes. Let's see how that goes.